go out there and play like 3 and 4 hours at a time. Every week they came up with a problem with the pay. My paycheck is cut, or not getting a paycheck at all.
George ain't paying. They be down the studio with their luggage saying we don't have nowhere to go. We went through that from time to time.
We are asking George, hey, George, we need a little money, a little something to eat. We got to almost be begging for something to eat sometime.
George paid me out of his pocket. It was a little.
I wanted to go out with Funkadelic, but to be paid, I knew I was welcome, but I needed to be paid.
You know, when you're a kid, you're not thinking about that. You're thinking about the art. You're thinking about getting the thing done. And then it's like, well, you should get paid for that.
Like a lot of guys who grew up poor, George was very careful with the buck. And I could see from the band's perspective that, you know, he was very tight.
He was supposed to have all the money, and we were supposed to get the leftovers. That's when things got bad.
55 shows in 61 days.
Time to get paid, time to go home. George calls me so matter-of-factly, here's your bus ticket, here's your $20. I flipped out. I saw myself throw him out of a window.
I wanted to get hold of him. And I run up to him and I grab him around the neck.
One guy in particular, I remember, and I can't name his name, he comes out and he's crying. He comes over to me like, man, I can't go home with this. He showed me the check and it was $50.
The business really sucked. It really sucked. And nobody really ever got their props on the financial side except for George.
I got to a point in time when the band started getting paid in drugs.
You get a hotel room, a place to sleep, travel, and get high.
I personally watched George bring the band in one by one and give them a gram of coke and no money, and keep the cash in his pocket.
He had a long fingernail. He'd go around and, hey, man, here, shoot.
He said, you want some? I said, oh, no, I don't mess with no cocaine. He said, oh, this ain't cocaine. I said, well, what is it? He said, it's green. I knew better, but I just like, okay. He put his long fingernail under me and I snorted that shit and felt like something blasted up through my nasal passage and went through my eye and blam at the back of my head. I was like, oh, and before I could protest, I was.
A lot of these band guys, they would be into George for $150. And then when they came to get their check, of course, he took the money out of their check. That's why he was able to advance them stuff they wanted, because he knew he could get it back when he paid them their salary.
Payday come. So you owe me this much for that little package.
He was like, you want your money or do you want a package? And I was like, man, you know, I got a family. I don't need a package.
The first time he pulled that one on me, I actually threatened to shoot his ass. Said, no, you pay me my money. I don't need to get no drugs from you. To do what I do, to play my music, and then you're gonna turn around and pay me with drugs? No.
Jerome Braley recalls when he tried making side money by hustling drugs to supplement for the lack of payment. Even that was shut down.
I was hustling the whole time. You had to do what you had to do. I would triple my pay, you know. When George found out, he put a sign on the bus that said there would be no drug dealing unless authorized by George.
Nobody else was going to be the dealer on that tour.
Mind your wants, because there's someone wants your mind. Funk is a non-profit organization. Program, deprogram, reprogram. How's your funk intellect?
All those lyrics, mind control, mood control.
Mind your wants, because there's someone that wants your mind.
And if you sat back and you read about the whole theory of the Funkadelic Paid, it tells you what's going to happen to you. The bigger the headache, the bigger the pill. George used to have a chemist around him named Jaggers. And Jaggers used to mess around with a lot of lab shit, a lot of drugs and putting shit together.
He knew we was gonna get involved in it. They actually encouraged getting high and all that kind of thing. And as a result, I got strung the fuck out. I was on angel dust. Angel dust will mess you up. It's a later on drug that comes back and haunt you daily.
And the worst thing that ever happened to that group was when people started smoking cocaine. When George and Sly first started working together in the 80s, Sly showed him how to make freebase. It's been downhill ever since.
We were passing around the pipe and I took a hit. It was so strong that it knocked me out. I fell on the floor, and when I came to, they were still passing the pipe around. And I stood up, and first thing that hit me was, did I miss my turn?
It make you so paranoid to the point that everything you saw on the floor you thought was a rock, and you would pick it up and put it in your pipe and smoke it and find out that's not it. Now tell me if that's not crazy.
I know they smoked a lot of rice.
Sly would call me up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, I'm sending a car for you because I heard George gave you a gram of coke.
When we got to the studio, no one was there but the engineer. So I said, where is everyone? And they said, we're down in the basement. So I go down in the basement to find out who was there. They all were there, but they were all crawling around on the floor. Dr. Funkenstein had these big old boulders big as your fist. He would just break them up in these little pieces and he'd throw them all on the floor. Called the Easter egg hunting.
I've seen it destroy so many people that I love. And some of them are not here anymore because of that shit.
George got the royalty checks. George signed the record deals. George got the money for the concerts. And everybody else in the group was on salary.
We were told we were getting X amount of money, royalties.
Was not sending out statements. He was not sending out royalty checks. He was basically just putting the money in his pocket.
When your name is documented on the record, whatever your deal is, you should get that.
In order for George to use any of our music, we had to give him the publishing and at least half the writer's credits off the top.
In 1975, the band released its single, Give Up the Funk. A year later, it would go gold and become the group's most famous song. Drummer Jerome Braley was one of his writers.
I knew that Jerome had a lot to do with the pattern of the song. Jerome deserved a share of the writers on it. But knowing George, he'd put down whoever he wanted to put down or put down nobody. I told George, Jerome deserves credit on that. You should give it to him because you're going to want to keep him in the band. And he did it.
Give Up the Funk, I actually got writer's share. But years later, I found out someone signed my name giving up my publishing share of Give Up the Funk. So my signature was forged.
It doesn't take a genius to be a liar and a thief and a cheat.
A lot of the money that I should be getting at this point, the residuals and all that kind of stuff, George made sure that all of that stuff came to him. He ripped us off, period.
Some money's coming in and we're not getting none. We can't do this here forever like this here. We got to start making some money somehow. That's how we end up having to put a lawsuit in. Oh, we sued for $11 million. His attorney got with our attorney and offered us some little chump change. I might as well say $40,000 to split up. $40,000, that ain't nothing. All this time, 5-6 years, we trying to get to court, get this $11 million, and our attorney gonna tell us to go for $40,000? Oh, no. And as it turned out, when we went to court, Judge Thomas gave a temporary judgment in his favor. And at that time, we were so broke, and our attorneys wanted all this big money to continue the case, and we didn't have it. So that's the way it ended.
My mom called and said, honey, you and Lynn might be in a little trouble. The feds came here looking for you. I said, the feds? Yeah, you got a corporation called the Brides of Funkadelic. I said, I don't have no corporation. She said, yes, you do. So we had to get a lawyer. We found out that the organization thing had incorporated us into a business using our Social Security names. They put employees that didn't exist with fictitious Social Security numbers that we were paying. Named people I never heard of.
Dawn thought she was part of a team that was trying to develop groups, but she was part of a scheme that was channeling money through her Social Security number.
You put so much into trying to be, a team player or something, and then sometimes you get it back, sometimes you don't.
The girls quickly discovered if they wanted to be involved with the organization, then you had to be available for George's needs.
Why do you think the women were brought into this all-man group?
Sex?
If you're not sleeping with somebody, you don't have much purpose. Go in there and do your thing and then go home, little girl. You were never really treated as an equal.
It's a boys' club. You know the deal. You want to sing, you know what? You know the deal. George wants to do a threesome. I'm like, what? I was kind of naive. I'm like, no, I'm not into that. He didn't basically give up. He just kept coming to my room.
George was like a father to me in the beginning.
Debbie was madly in love with George. And then, from my understanding, they had a relationship. They were together for a long time. She was very young, I think 16, 17.
I saw a man and I was a woman.
He would actually flaunt other women in front of her, and she could not handle it at all. So it broke her down mentally.
It caused me to have a nervous breakdown.
I just watched Debbie just slowly just crumble.
She was like crazy about George. It destroyed her. She has never, ever come back from that.
All these people that's gone and George supposed to have been doing stuff with, there ain't nobody got nowhere. Gary Shatter, he didn't really get nowhere dealing with George.
One time they actually gave him a solo deal with MCA. George took all the front money. They didn't promote it. George knew that without him, he could not do it. He could not go out there and sing those songs himself. So he had to figure out a way to keep Gary under his thumb and keep him close. What's the best way to keep someone in line is to make them think they can't do anything else.
No humping here, there's no bumping. Everywhere there's a lack of bumping.
Brides won the R&B Award for Best New Female Group in February 1981. By June, the Brides were defunct. It was over.
It seems as though after we won those last 2 major awards, we got cut off at the knees. Everything was shut down for us. We couldn't do interviews. There were no t-shirts. There were no photos. There were no promotional. There was no nothing on us anymore. All of a sudden, it got snatched. A hoe will never be on the same playing field as her pimp. You done kind of overstepped your boundaries. And all that money mysteriously evaporated and disappeared within the organization. I was in the studio, and George was sitting there, and an Atlantic record representative came over. He said, man, I understand that Warner's wants to drop One Nation, the single. He says, can you guys wait a couple of weeks before you drop that single? So the Bride single, we're going to try to push it up to the #1 slot. George said, yeah, that'll work. Literally a couple of days later, One Nation came out.
One Nation.
So instead of us climbing up to the #1 slot, we start dropping down, and One Nation hit, they went to the #1 spot.
Everything we put out, we wanted to sell. We didn't have that much money that we were looking to make more money.
George did an interview with a magazine called Black Echoes, and he said that he wasn't gonna let 3 little girls kick him in his ass.
So that's not true. The girls may have that perspective from a point of view that that's what they wish it was, but it wasn't that.
Why, when in a business that thrives on success, would you try to stop your artists from being successful artists that you created? Because there was one superstar per family, and females, wait a minute, that ain't gonna happen.
They weren't the only one. Bernie Worrell's album didn't happen. It was a pretty good album. Eddie Hazel did a version of California Dreamin' that was out of this world. Warner Brothers didn't push it. Didn't happen.
Slowly but surely, members of the band were getting fed up and had enough.
We started asking about our royalties and we need more pay. And one of the road managers at the time came on the bus and told us that, we were out of luck. We're not getting anything. We were in Pittsburgh and we stopped the bus. We actually got off the bus and said, we're not doing the show. We walked back to the hotel. It was in the middle of a snowstorm.
I went to George's ranch when he was living up in Michigan. And you see how he lives. I mean, the thing looked like the Ponderosa out in the middle of nowhere. And I think Ted Nugent was his neighbor. Yet he lives like that, and he had the right to because he is George Clinton. But, I'm like living with my mom in a row house. You're doing a job and you can't get paid fairly doing it. I had to leave.
When I really understood that we were just being used all along, and I got tired of it. I just didn't want to do it anymore.
I had to leave that gig because the money was so short,
We were the top. And the business was being handled terribly, atrociously. I left in '80, heartbroken, disillusioned, and I enlisted in the Air Force that fall.
I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to do any more sessions free. Fuck it.
People who've been in this group lived and died. Ain't really got nowhere with George. What goes around came around to him too. George got himself. He let his shit slip away from him.
He had this guy named Nene Montez. This guy was deep, man. He had a contact with the Colombians. He was ruthless. I mean, some things I've seen with him I can't even talk about.
He was real tall. He would wear the One Nation scarf, the cowboy boots. He was a character, had a beard. He was an advisor to Castro. He was a radical.
Whenever Nene or his entourage showed up, there was always abundance of
drugs. You're talking about cocaine. The drugs started coming in by the truckload.
But everybody wanted to smoke it up. And it was pink. The color of it was pink. So you could cook it 3 or 4 times before it turned white. It was like so much of it, you know. What can I say? They were making deals.
They owed him so much money for the drugs until they actually started making payments by paying him off with publishing rights to a lot of the music.
George was doing all kind of crazy things. Sometimes he would get high and sign over some stuff and forgot who he signed it over to. Millions.
Yeah, this cat comes in and he's like, you know, doing stuff on the table for George. And he gets away with owning some of the tunes. And he collects a couple of $1 million. Well, you know, none of us ever got $1 million.
To make it sound like he done got ripped off from different people and he's looking out for everybody and so on and so forth. George ain't never really done shit for nobody.
I hadn't seen George in about 25 years. So I walked in his trailer, and the first thing he says to me, "Who brought Nanny Montez around?" So I thought about it, I said, "You did, George." He said, "Yeah, I did, didn't I?" That was George's coke, man. He had a lot of influence with him.
With the loss of publishing and disbanding of the group, George, depressed, self-medicating himself, thought his career was over. He didn't realize his biggest hit would come when least expected. Gary Scheider and David Lee Spradley created George Clinton's most popular song.
I remember it clearly. It was about 6 o'clock. The snow had just started coming down. I had a session booked at United Sound. We had a device called the Man in the Box, which is a drum machine. The beat that I chose that day was doom, 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 doom. Very steady, simple beat, you know, to use. So we told Mike, the engineer, said, "Hey man, flip the tape over. Let's hear what it sounds like." Flip the tape over and hit play and came out and we're going like, oh my God. Started playing some ideas on a keyboard. Doom, 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 do, do, do. Oh, doom, 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 do, do, do. I said, oh yeah, doom, doom. And I started playing with this little bass line thing. And finally I worked it out, an 8-bar pattern for the bass line. And I said, okay, I got my 2 sections. George came running in out the snow, barefooted, snot running out of his nose, thinking his career was over with. That brother was so stoned, man. He couldn't stay in front of the microphone. So I got on one arm, Gary got on another arm, and we were both holding him up. And he just hollered all through the song. He hollered all through the song and then left. Now, how he expect me to do something with this? Funky dogs, nasty dogs. What Gary would do is take a little line like that and blow it up. When you put 6 tracks of unison on something, it makes it big. You know, it makes it stick. It makes it hit you. A couple of days later, George came back to the studio talking about he's gonna fix his parts. And I said, you can't do that. He said, well, why can't I do that? I said, because I done built all my voices around what you did. He said, you're crazy. You took that crazy stuff I did and made it into something. I said, yeah, I thought you meant what you was doing.
Atomic